أهلا وسهلا فيكم. جلستنا اليوم بعنوان الزمن بلسان المدينة. يتحاور في هذه الجلسة الفنان القدير والشريك المؤسس لأجو فريبيا أحمد ماطر مع المعماري والكاتب في مجال التاريخ العمراني تود ريس عن مساهمة الفن في تنمية المدينة، وكيف للفن أن يمكن المجتمعات في سياق التنمية الحضارية المعاصرة، وما على العاملين في القطاع مراعاته من حماية وحفظ لإرث المدينة خلال تطويرها. Enjoy the talk. The talk will be in English. الجلسة حتكون باللغة الإنجليزية في حال احتجتوا إلى ترجمة. شكرا.
شكرا لكم جميعا، وشكرا للبينال اللي أعطانا هذه الفرصة لديالوج خفيف. يعني ما بنجي هنا نتكلم عن تغيرات العمارة وأهمية لا، ليكون ديالوج لطيف نتكلم فيه عن بعض المشاهدات، ويكون جزء من حياتنا ومتابعتنا للتغيرات من جوانب الفن، من جوانب العمارة. الفن عمارة والعمارة فن. سعيد جدا أيضا بأني ألتقي بصديق لم ألتقي فيه من فترة طويلة إلا في الكتب أو في مشاريع، لم نلتقي وجها لوجه إلا لحظات قليلة. كنت أعرفه أكثر من كثير، يعني وكأننا نلتقي. كنت أبحث عن كتاب أجد تود، كنت أبحث. اتفقنا أن نلتقي يومين قبل هذا اللقاء، تحدثنا، شاركنا كثير من الكتابات. Todd, you see most of the book in my library already. And كنت أروح مثلا ألتقي بأحد المعماريين اللي خططوا أحد المدن الكبرى عندنا، فكان يقول لي نفس تود كان موجود، أو أنا كنت موجود. فأهلا بكم اليوم أنه نشارك معكم بعض الملاحظات أو بعض ما تحدثنا فيه في هذا اليومين الماضيين، كمشاركة، ملاحظات، قراءات عامة. لن تكون محاضرة عن شيء ما، ستكون ملاحظات ومشاركات، وأتوقع أنه نصف ساعة أتمنى نكون خفيفين، ووصلنا لكثير من القراءات اللي تنال مشاركتكم. وأيضا إذا كان هناك شيء تضيفونه لمعلوماتنا لأنها مرت بنا جميعا، نتمنى أن نسمع من الجميع. شكرا لكم.
Hi. Ahmed, thank you for those nice translated words. And first, thank you for coming to the dialogue in my mother tongue, not in your mother tongue. So thank you for meeting me at this far. And thank you as well to everyone from the Biennale who invited me to be here, Raneem and Masa, for making sure I could be here. It's also really, also to Hassam Dakak, actually, who is here, who introduced us a few years ago in Jeddah. So thank you for introducing us. I've been hearing during a lot of the panels today and yesterday about this moment of change, and I started to think about this in terms of architecture as well, but this word of moment, as if there is suddenly this breaking point where things are suddenly different from one side of the line to the other. And then I thought about this word moment. It actually comes, in English, comes from the Latin momentum, meaning movement. And I find that really interesting because moment seems to be kind of a still point, a very minute moment, a piece of time, but it actually is referring to a constant flux of time. And I think it's important to think of, if we're talking about change, we're also talking about change that happens over time, not just from one side of the line to the next. And I was also thinking my first time in Riyadh was in 2009, when that was also a moment of change, but yet it seems very much that moment doesn't exist anymore. It's a kind of forgotten moment. But it was a moment of economic cities. Photography was allowed on the street again, and that was my first experience of the city. But as Ahmed said, we wanted to share some of our kind of visual notes from our conversations over the last 2 days. And we were starting with this one. I said I was going to start with what's on the outside, and then you would go into the inside. So I'm just going to, my first observations, we were talking about pictorial representation of architecture and also cities, and how these are also related to the notion of the garden. And that while we might look at an image like this from an illuminated manuscript, that we might want to begin to look at the content, but it's actually the border that we should begin with. Because it is essentially, we can't have the garden without the wall. We can't have the garden without the existence of something on the other side of the wall to compare it to give it contrast. And I also often find that to be something about architecture that we need to be carefully mindful of, that architecture is about borders, that oftentimes we talk about this sharedness or that architecture can open to us, but we also have to be aware that it is about closed borders and making certainly thresholds from outside to inside, but nevertheless recognizing that there's a certain amount of that we give something over, a sacrifice really.
Yes, and also to think, when I work a lot in this type of work, illumination for manuscript and things, and yet it's one very important when we go inside. If we talk about garden, the garden starts usually with the seeds. Seeds. I think, let's think about our city and this. Say, if it's, I'm an artist, let's me express with this language, so maybe it could work. I think it should be like this. It's the seeds. We grow it. We know where we grow it, but sometimes there is an changing in this growing. It's need all of this environment. It's need to watch it. It's need. I think building a city or is something that should happen growing from inside also. Yes, border can be the future. Future now is everyone think about drawing the line, but also in the same times give it the life. I think seeds grow it. It's need the water, it's need the air, it's need the sun, it's need this. I think watching, thinking about how make it, trim it. It's like building a garden. I think this is something. The time will decide it by itself. The garden will decide it the time. We will wait. We will watch. We will think. We'll enjoy the living on this garden. I think this was the beginning of our dialogue. How we think. Let's start from the beginning. Was a good, and it's the dialogue start with the thinking about the garden. Then our talk take us to one of the old book. I don't know if you know about this, Al-Atlal. This was a book or come like with every like 3 months. It's a book by itself, but it's updated. It's Al-Atlal. What's Al-Atlal in your reading or in? I know you are also in Arabic. You read a lot and.
I mean, actually, you had a really beautiful way of describing this word in English. I mean, I think the most general word would be ruin.
Yeah. Is it ruins? Somehow.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there was a way that you described.
It's ruins, but it's the emotion when you come to the place where what was ruined, but emotionally you connect it to the past, to the memory.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful distinction between ruin and al-atlal, is that al-atlal, at least the way that you describe it to me, is, it means that it's not an object. It is somehow attached to the viewer, and it is immediately triggering some sort of response or reaction.
Yes, exactly, and that's I think it's a good word. And this books, it's talk about a lot of ancient history. That's what take us to start with the Al-Atlal. Actually, the Ain Zubaydah here was mentioned, and we start to talk about Ain Zubaydah as one of the first urban planning. Then we will go to it on slides in future, but also Madinat Al-Faw. This photo here is from National Museum. It found in the Al-Faw city, south of أو جنوب منطقة الرياض, south of Riyadh region. So for Al-Faw, I thought we talk about Al-Faw, and we will plan to visit it as well. We choose Al-Faw because also we think about places that not in focus now. Oh.
I think we also got to this. I mean, we should explain maybe,
yes.
if you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
Kind of why we came to Al-Faw suddenly.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, I did not know about Al-Faw before you described it. But I think, one of the reasons when we decided to do this dialogue, we were having it in Diriyah.
Yes.
We were, and this is a place where I had once seen the ruins of Al-Turayf. And in my own kind of personal reading in the last time, I've been reading about ruins and how to read ruins. And so I suggested this to you, and then you took me into your library, your massive library in your studio, and found this Al-Lal. And so we started this kind of dialogue about what ruins mean in terms of specifically Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
So
yeah.
And then you wanted to move. So I mentioned, the place everyone's talking about. Al-Ula.
Yes, Al-Ula. Okay. So we decided to share with you today the things that we didn't talk usually about. Al-Ula and also Khaybar. This photo by Earth Team, I think معاذ العوفي وأصدقائه نشكرهم أنهم شاركونا. Al-Khaybar is one of important city in Al-Medina that have also this beautiful neighborhood and urban, and how the city in the middle and the garden around it and using the water. It's one of the most beautiful things also to think about it. It's also one of those like Al-Faw. It's something we didn't talk about it. Then we go to Ain Zubaydah. Ain Zubaydah is like very futuristic. It's in the ancient.
Amazing.
It's a futuristic, very futuristic project.
I'm curious how many people know about Ain Zubaydah. Is this
good? But do you know Ain Zubaydah or Darb Zubaydah? Yeah, that's good. Because that what we talk today is about the road, the Darb Zubaydah, because it's different from Ain Zubaydah. Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, well, you should explain what the project is. Right?
Yeah.
Or do you want
yes,
me to?
Please. I want to hear from you,
Okay.
from Harun Rashid and Alf Layla wa Layla. That, yeah.
So now I have to be, I'm being tested before the public of what I've learned about Ain Zubaydah from Ahmed. Ain Zubaydah, I understand, was commissioned really
Yes.
by
Harun al-Rashid.
Harun al-Rashid's wife. Zubaydah.
Yes.
And Harun al-Rashid will come back to the dialogue a little bit later, I think. But I believe that she had been in Mecca and realized that there was a dearth of water. And so despite the amount of cost that it took to create this kind of essentially aqueduct that goes underground and above ground for, I think, like 30 kilometers.
Yes.
There's a map. Is it? No. Can you go back? I guess we don't have the map. Oh, kind of there. Thank you. It's starting at Wadi Numan and going all the way as close as it could to Al-Haram.
Yes, to
in
Mecca.
Yes.
Yes.
And it was an incredible cost. And then it's also connected, not as an aqueduct, but through a kind of dotting or series of wells all the way to...
More than 30 wells.
More than 30 wells
30.
all the way into Iraq, right?
To the Iraq, and there was to Al-Kufa, and they called it in Arabic طريق الحج الكوفي. And also there was a thing to connect to the two rivers, Dijla and Al-Furat.
I mean, I think what's so beautiful about this project that you brought up is, we were talking about ruins, and you showed the villages and also these pages of the book,
Yes.
which seem very contained, right? Like settlements. But this is the opposite of settlement. This is movement.
Movement, yeah.
And this is about helping people move where otherwise they wouldn't be able to move through the environment. Actually, infrastructure.
That for movement, for the road of Hajj and also for ritual of Hajj.
Yeah.
So it's the project that built for movement, for not settlement. That's why it's a different. It's something to think about futuristic things. It's the Hyperloop.
Yeah, exactly. and it's like the 8th century's Christian era, right? Like
Yes.
only maybe 100 years or so. Yeah,
We
there's
have
the
the
map.
map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that includes the wells, right? So yeah. Then there was the other story. So when you brought up Zubaydah,
Yes.
we had already had this on the screen in our discussions, the arches of Ctesiphon or Takkasra, which are in current day Iraq, but were part of the Sasanian Empire. And there's a really kind of beautiful segment of Ibn Khaldun's the Muqaddimah, where he describes Harun al-Rashid's attempts to destroy the arches of Ctesiphon because they represented a previous empire, a previous a way of governing the area. And in fact, this was around Baghdad, so Baghdad is this planned city nearby, and this was a kind of threat, architecture as a threat, ruin as a threat, and it needs to be destroyed, but he couldn't destroy it. And the way that Ibn Khaldun describes it, if you could go back, the way that Ibn Khaldun describes the reasoning is that because the Sasanian Empire had been a complex and thorough empire, that the equivalent was to be found in its architecture that was well built and simply could not be demolished, which I thought was really beautiful, that Harun al-Rashid wanted to destroy, and Zubaydah wanted to build.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story, and Harun al-Rashid in Alf Layla wa Layla, like what you say. Usually and I find I surprised by this from Todd. If you want to talk, then we jump directly when we talk for this photo because it's about built and rebuilt, but it's also about momentum. You said, but it's about the cycle of Ibn Khaldun. I will let you. I will not take. I want you to explain it like what you explained because it's really very interesting. This photo, 2009,
right,
by Todd. This photo today by Todd, today morning.
And so thank you to Ahmed and to Mahmoud, who works with the...
I'm sorry, Marwan, we smuggle.
But actually, when we were talking about ruin poetry today, and the idea of looking at ruins and being kind of taken emotionally by them, I thought of this comparison when we went to look at these. So that, as Ahmed said, I took this photograph in 2009 on my first trip to Riyadh. That's my dear friend Jamal al-Jabri on the right, who guided me around the city and Diriyah. And we were able to see the kind of ongoing work on the site. And now, 12 years later, I don't know if the sun was not well placed. But you can see that it's gone through some certain works. It's no longer a ruin. And in the words of Ibn Khaldun, this is actually, Ibn Khaldun would describe societies building monuments that eventually become ruins and eventually disappear into the landscape. Here we have monuments becoming ruins, becoming monuments again.
And ruin becoming a monument. Ruin, it's kept ruin. It's like freezing.
It's like, yeah, like a frozen moment, right? No longer, ruins have time, right?
Yes, yes.
Ruins continue to age.
Yeah.
And yet there's a kind of capping off and filling in, kind of like someone had bad dentistry done to kind of make sure that nothing else will change, that it will stay as it is, as it was found in 2009.
Become a monument.
It's now a monument, perhaps one day to become a ruin, right?
the ruin becoming a monument as
and
well.
then becoming a monument again.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a cycle. It's a story.
Maybe you can turn it on and off. Right.
It's a nice stuff today about. Then, yeah. Then from this, we continue in Diriyah. This is, it's, I mean, like what we say, the presentation will be like the dialogue that we had. This is 75. Is Hassan Fathi in Diriyah, one of the plan of the middle class housing. And for me, here is the drawing. Is the beauty of the family in the middle. It's the triangles. I mean, it's not saying this is the right or wrong, but to enjoy art and beauty of Hassan Fathi in this time. I think for me to find this and to show it again, it's part of important.
You blew my mind when you showed me this. This is really just amazing. I had heard that Hassan Fathi worked in Saudi, and toward the end of his career, I think.
Yes, he worked in Jeddah in 72 of 74 of the. So he worked in Tabuk 74, 75 he did this in Riyadh. Yeah.
And it's just a really kind of, and this is actually the part of our talk where we start talking about modern architecture, which we assert that this is modern, right?
Yes. So ancient take us to modern very fast.
I mean, at least what I could find very quickly about this project after you told me about it is that it was actually created for affordable housing.
It's
right?
for affordable houses, and it has 2 or 3 types. I like the way of courtyard. I like the way of the room, the intimacy. I mean, even the drawing of Hassan Fathi's style and I love it. I love it, and I love even the font that used in Diriyah and writing. So for me, it was very important to have this, especially now working here, and so it was one of the things. Then take us to.
Yeah. So what was? I can't remember how we got to this part.
I think we jumped to Diriyah, then we go, let's wait, let's think about a little bit. Let's come back, flashback a little bit. Would you see that?
That's right. This was the connection.
Yes.
Hassan Fathi worked for Doxiadis.
Yes.
He worked, Konstantinos Doxiadis.
Yes.
I think he worked on the Baghdad plan for Baghdad, where he did a similar housing scheme, actually, for Baghdad. He came into Doxiadis' firm as a well-known architect. And so I think one of the themes that we also wanted to talk was in terms of Western architects versus non-Western architects. But I think this is a nice twist on how we usually see that, where Hassan Fathi goes to work for Doxiadis in Greece, and he's not going to serve the master architect. He's going there to actually help the architect who needs his help in terms of knowing how to build locally, build economically, and in ways that can be done quickly. And I think that was the kind of one thing that we wanted to bring up in terms of Hassan Fathi as a truly modern architect.
Yes.
And this is actually going back then in time.
Yes, back then to Riyadh, especially cities like Riyadh, also Islamabad, I think Washington, but we talk also about the expansion of the city in the grid, the concept of grid usually, but in the same time it's something also with the human settlement, what he called it, Doxiadis, he called it the echistic concept or echistic studies, when he studied human settlement. And this is also fit with Hassan Fathi, because all of his housing and things talk about affordable of human settlement.
Right. And it's also connected, and especially in terms of, we have another image which we'll get to, but Doxiadis is very much attached to kind of international organizations, international development organizations, the World Bank, and I think that's also, something that we had talked about is, in terms of Riyadh or Saudi Arabia being closed to the rest of the world, in the 70s, we definitely see the work of Doxiadis being this kind of a channel of international expertise coming in through the United Nations, through the World Bank.
Yes,
but also in a way that Doxiadis is not, he's chosen, I think, in a way who...
For the big cities, he was the stars of that time of building the
Right.
master planners for the city. And also United Nations was very close to, it was the building, the program in the United Nations to focus and recommend for the cities. And that's very important.
Yeah, the ecumenopolis, which
Yes.
is the idea of, I guess, the spatial translation of echistics, which was the idea of the global city.
Yes.
So in this map, he's trying to occupy the world with humans. And wherever it's very dark, it's uninhabitable. So the lighter it is, the more inhabitable it is, according to Doxiadis' office. And actually, I was looking at this, Ahmed, after we talked.
Yeah.
Saudi has a pretty dark... It looks like he just made enough lightness for Riyadh to be habitable.
At that time.
But what's nice about this is that he's then connecting Riyadh to this
To
kind
the
of global city,
of
right?
his,
In 1971.
Yes. Then we continue with the United Nations.
Yeah.
Then one of the most important also moment, Abdurrahman Hassanin Makhlouf, the master planner for Mecca. This is his passport from United Nations. He was 59 appointed to do the master plan of Mecca city. And this is his answer in 62 to United Nations about planning of Mecca. After that, he do the first master plans for Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, and Jizan. I went before to do an interview with Hassan Makhlouf in Abu Dhabi, but Todd, he was before there.
I went before you, but the room looked like this when you met him, right?
Yeah, he when I met him, he have the glasses.
Oh, yeah.
After that.
Yeah. But I guess one thing, too, before we get into Makhlouf, you mentioned the United Nations.
Yes.
And I think that, Makhlouf is a very interesting character. He's Egyptian.
Yes.
He's from Cairo. But he gets his final degree in architecture and planning, I think, from Munich.
Yes.
In southern Germany. And he definitely was very proud of the fact that he was coming with, in fact, you can see Deutschland. These are some of his. So when you go to visit his office, he would literally have his own museum set up to tell you all about Dr. Makhlouf, and he would move the boards around and sit with you at various times, and he would talk about his experiences in Germany as an architect and planner, and then working for the United Nations. So again, kind of blurring this line between what is a Western architect, what is a non-Western architect.
Yes.
And Makhlouf is certainly someone who is moving across borders in this way.
This is photo of his office in Abu Dhabi to remember Al-Maktab Al-Arabi. Yeah, this is his photo when he arrived and he take it from the airplane for Jeddah. This is Jeddah, all before the new Corniche. Oh, this is very also important. Yeah. Also, the selection of Makhlouf, because he was the son of Sheikh Al-Azhar, Hassanin Makhlouf, because he will understand the needs of the Islamic needs a city, and he was one appointed by that during the time of King Faisal. So this was also the same you talk about something too. Yeah.
Right, as if he could again move between borders, right? Instituting modernization, but also understanding what it would mean, for example, to build within Islamic guidelines.
Yes. Again, here.
We
continue with the Islamic influence.
Very good, very well, yeah. You should.
So with the Yamazaki, the first building was in Dhahran, Matar al-Dhahran. Yamazaki, he write a lot in his books about Islamic art and the influence in the building with the Islamic art. And amazing, with it called al-Muqarnas. He used al-Muqarnas concept in some of his building, But then he minimalized it to arches. And with the Yamazaki, it's a lot of interesting work during that time. Maybe we jump to this.
You blew my mind with this image.
This is a discovery.
I knew the airport, but when you showed this to me, I was...
هذه تعرفوها في الرياض. صندوق الصناعي كان وزارة المونيتري ايجنسي، بنك المركزي صندوق الصناعي الآن. وهذه البلو برنت لتوينز تاور، الورد تريد سنتر. The same architect, منير يامازاكي. Also, the influence of the arch of this is, as he said in his book, or as said in many of the first Islamic architect in USA. This is built by Bin Laden Group. This one in Riyadh as well. So it's a coincidence, but this is very important to have this in our.
But I can hardly imagine this actually being. It has to be more than coincidence. Like he knows what he's doing, right? I mean, and these buildings still exist, right?
Suleiman, is it exist? Still exist. Yeah.
Amazing.
Also, say Kange di Akwan. Also, this is. Do you know about this? Yeah, but this is not the final one. This is by
Kenzo Tange.
Akwan. This was a very nice proposal, but this also take me to the same of this scene. Kenzo Tange, one of the first. I think it's the only mosque done by.
Really, in all of Saudi Arabia.
I think by Kenzo Tange.
Oh,
yeah, because that's new. Kenzo Tange, this also mosque in Riyadh. For me, there is similarity on the other looking for this too. But also, this is King Faisal Foundation in Riyadh. The mosque is really beautiful. It's like a cylinder, but with this cut, you see the crescent, al-hilal. It's from visual point of view, it's very beautiful.
And also, thinking of Kenzo Tange and also the other architects after him who were known as the metabolists, are coming from Tokyo and the rest of Japan, and in kind of a similar way as Greece is treated as the kind of border of Europe, that is connected to the Mediterranean. But Japan, modernism from Japan was also seen as a way to non-Westernize modern architecture in a way.
Yeah, I think in the same way, the idea becoming non-West, non-East. It's Oh, then future. We jump to the future, and already they give us 10 or 5.
So we seem to be doing okay, huh? We wanted to end with the future.
Yes.
And it's almost impossible, if you're talking about the future in Saudi Arabia, not to think about, in some way or another, what's being proposed for NEOM, right? And this is a recent, at least for me, this is a recent, it's actually in the Dubai airports, in the terminals, gigantic billboards for this new proposed industrial city, I think called Oxagon.
Yes, Hexagon.
It's a curious new chapter of NEOM, the world's largest floating city. And usually I think of floating cities of when you don't have land. But NEOM is described as large as the country of Belgium. But still it's being proposed on water, which could be a way of making references to other things like climate change, or maybe responding to people's concerns about touching the landscape of Riyadh, of NEOM.
Yeah, and this with the NEOM will be part of future and studies and thinking and idea, like when we started with the garden and Ain Zubaydah, and now here in the future. So we take you with us in the glance of journey inside the time or within the time as a tribe. Yeah, and here is very interesting video by Todd, because he visited Neom in the beginning. I supposed to go, but that's time I couldn't join.
Actually, yeah, that's true. We met very briefly in Jeddah, and then I get a call that I should go to Neom and Ahmed would be there, and then I believe you got sick.
Sick, yeah, I get sick, so I missed this. So, but Todd keep telling me today and show me this, so I say, please show it. It's the time observation from Todd at that time. Very beautiful video.
Yeah, it was a kind of wonderful trip. They took us around in a helicopter. I don't know if I'd ever been in a helicopter before. So I took photographs and some film with my iPhone at the time, and have worked on this. I used this for a presentation a little bit later. But I think you know, we're going to talk about over it, and you mentioned the gardens again, but also ruins. And I think about how, you know, how they wanted to show us these parts of Neom, or I guess the area between Tabuk and the coast of Neom. I think they wanted to kind of impress us with the beauty, and that was easy to do, to impress us. Nevertheless, one starts to think about, like, it feels so ancient. You know, it's geological time, not human time, that we were going by. I don't know, what do people talk about? I mean, this kind of part of Saudi, northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia, I mean, it's magical. But yeah, how do people handle the fact that you see these kinds of images of geological time, but also a setting for a brand new city?
Yeah, I think also this is, even from artistic or emotion point of view, it's a nice thing to see and to hear and to listen and to rethink about beauty of this, and how the future will give us about the modernity. I mean, the futuristic city will invent itself. Like what you say, the hexagons could be something out to preserve land, or it could be movable city. If you remember the concept of movable city, I think it was 50s or 60s, something like this. So within this talks or dialogue, these 2 days, I had very beautiful and nice, and also we drove by the car around. We saw a lot of things we would love to share, but with the time and things, we summarize this talk to share, and we find out that to end it with the Neom and with this geological beautiful views and nice, and yeah, so thank you so much, and maybe we need also to hear from.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Has anyone? We pushed any buttons or thoughts?
Oh, nice.
Best in Riyadh.
What do I like best in Riyadh?
Yeah, what did you like when you go on the streets, and how many times did you come here, and what did change in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, I've been here maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 12 years. So, and I don't know the city very well. I think you've seen a little bit of what I know, understanding it through the eyes of architecture or planners. Each time I come here, there seems to be new development, right? I mean, the most specific thing would be King Abdullah Financial District. It was this kind of rendering that I saw all the time on my screen, and now it becomes something maybe not as extreme as it looked on the computer screen. It seems kind of normal, with a little bit of fancy curves here and there. But one then kind of is suddenly faced with the very mundane questions of who will use it? How will it be used? How will you get to it? But what do I like about it? I would say that the moments, and I can't give you specific ones, but the moments where I begin to like Riyadh is when I can walk. And it's tricky, but there are moments.
Yeah, thanks for this talk. Really, it's a great pleasure to have you here, Todd. Thanks, Ahmed, as well for being here. I'm quite familiar with your research so far, Al-Manakh, that was done before, and the whole cities in the Gulf. And especially now, you raise a lot of issues, at least for me, very interesting. I mean, maybe it's not, we need a lot of time to discuss it if I want to raise it here, but I will just take 2 points. 3. One is, I don't know if you meant it on purpose, but I think it was nice to start with an enclosed garden and end with an open landscape. I don't know if it was meant, but it's, for me, I saw a big message in it. It's very beautiful. And this is take me to other point. I mean, you studied all the other cities in the Gulf, I would say, especially in the Emirate, the emergence of the instant cities and so on. And we know that the famous driven motto was, we build it, they come. My question to you is there any lesson here to learn from the lesson around Saudi Arabia so that either we do the same or we do it differently? I mean, knowing the big differences, but also the big similarities between, you know, Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Arabian Peninsula. I mean, what the mistakes we should avoid, but also what are the things we should maybe embrace? And maybe I'll stop here and later I'll ask you the third one, not to make it more complicated.
I mean, I hesitate to give advice to a country.
Well, it's not advice, it's more like your opinion.
My opinion.
Yeah.
You know, one thing, and maybe I'll just respond by looking at NEOM, and I agree with you. The contrast between closed and open was meant, and intentionally. I mean, I think there is a nervousness about NEOM in terms of drawing lines. I mean, we do have the obsessive the line proposal, and then this octagon proposal. But we also have this kind of moving around, this kind of nervousness of wanting to draw the line for the city. And I get that. It's not a criticism. I think as an architect, I hate to draw that first line. You know, you want something that you have to work against. So that's a feeling of sympathy or empathy. But I think, you know, build it and they will come. You know, I think the NEOM response is there's nothing to hold you back, which is, again, another issue of not something but nothing, right? There's kind of constant deferral of form and deferral of a resistance in which a kind of city you work around in. And so then I wonder, okay, but who are these people who want nothing to hold them back? Who wants that? Who doesn't, you know, want to come someplace where they feel like they live where other people have lived? I live in a house, for example. My very small house in Amsterdam, I designed the interior myself. And it drives me mad to live in a house that I designed because every light switch needs to be somewhere else. And I, you know, picked the wrong materials here and there. But if it were a house designed by someone else, it wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah, actually, why I'm saying this, because I think the kingdom maybe has plenty to show that maybe the motto, I believe, that's my opinion, doesn't apply here, because you don't need to build to come. I think there's a lot of things to see, and this presentation shows it all, I think. My last point was, when you discuss about the Japanese architect, it was a great example. I mean, not because personally I have affinity, but I feel as Western architects now building in the region, we're coming backward rather than forward, because you showed great example, Ahmed, about Tange. Although it was futuristic back then, but it responded to the regional architecture in the notion of courtyard and so on. Now what we see around as Western architect, if you don't control them, I don't mean in the sense of like oppressing, but in a sense of maintaining the guidelines and understanding of the cities, they just get crazy, and we see this in the Emirate and Dubai and whatever. So I think there is also a big question about how the Western architect now will be approaching the context here in Saudi Arabia. That's maybe something personally I feel alarmed, and I'm really anxious as an architect as well, aware of the context. So how do you see that from your perspective as well?
I think I'm just, I mean, I don't mean this as a kind of defense of having been born in America, but I do have a hesitation to use terms like Western and non-Western. And I think you know, a lot of times, you know, you know, Dr. Makhlouf, so great that he was able to help Abu Dhabi, for example, and Mecca before, you know, these British architects came in. But Makhlouf was working in an exchange of ideas at the time, and yes, he could speak the language, and language, first of all, thank you again to Ahmed for doing this in English, is a huge thing, and I don't mean to underestimate that. But he is also someone who is bringing ideas and channeling ideas that he's gotten from somewhere else. And I think that's how, you know, if cities are a marketplace, you know, my favorite example is Dubai, which is often called not a city but an entrepot. An entrepot is a word, you know, that's Latin roots come from between places. You know, cities are actually non-places in the sense that they are places where there is no origin and there is no destination. There's just constant movement. And I don't mean to move away from responsibility from one place or another, but we need to understand that ideas are not like, you know, they're not rooted in a kind of geographical location. It's a vague response, but I think that's where I stand.
Thank you, thank you.
I think we collaborate fine. I think one thing I just want to do, I don't know if the question is better suited for Ahmed or Todd, but one thing that I appreciated about the narrative of the presentation is that you talk about movement of people rather than settlement.
Yes.
And the recording of movement. So my question is, how has that movement been recorded throughout time in Saudi? And who has it been recorded by, through your experience?
I will come back to Ibn Khaldun when the same. If I come back to the concept of sociological study in Ibn Khaldun, القراءات الاجتماعية كان فيها كثير من طبعا في if I spoke in Arabic if you okay with that.
Of course.
حسام بتكلم بالعربي عشان أقدر أوصل الفكرة. في ابن خلدون عندما حكى حكاية الطين وحكاية الرمال. الرمال كانت تبعث على الاكتشاف والانتقال في احتياج الظروف كحكاية اجتماعية. إذن هي حياة متنقلة. الرحلة الرحالة لأنه يحتاجون إلى البحث عن قصة اقتصادية للحياة. ثقافة الطين أو حضارة الطين كانت دائما ساتلمنت مثقفة. لذلك تلقى هذا التنوع في يوم من الأيام. رحلة الدين احتاجت إلى الترحال لأنه في طريق حج سنوي. لذلك كان فكرة بناء المدينة المنتقلة أو المتقدمة أو التي تمر أو خدمة الإنسان المتنقلة المستمرة ضرورة دينية روحانية خلينا نقول وضرورة اقتصادية. في الجانب الآخر حضارة الطين كانت تبعث على ضرورة settlement أو إذا كنا أيوة السكنية السكنة أو السكن. وأيضا هي فرصة اقتصادية لأن المكان سيبزرع سيكون المزارعين فهذا هي. فلذلك كان لو تلاحظ كان في العرض التقديمي اليوم اعتمدنا على الطريقين لكن كنا نريد المفاجأة بطريق زبيدة لأنها فكرة مستقبلية جدا. نقول فكرة تقدمية حتى ليست مستقبلية تقدمية في لحظاتها أنه سيستمر المياه والعيون على مسار الحج من الفرات إلى مكة. بروبوزل تاريخي يعني خيال أبعد إلى الخيال. فكانت هذه الفكرة بشكل عام. أنا عن نفسي من المعجبين بفكرة ديوكسيادس في الإكستيك ستاديز لكن لا تكفي. معجب جدا بفكرة ستادي إنه في ستاديز لهيومن ساتلمنت around the world. He did big يعني research and good great يعني job في هذا. لكن الحياة تبعث على الترحال والانتقال. جزء كبير من الإكستيك ستادي سيحتاج إلى التغيرات. حياتنا ستعتمد على التنقل. ستصبح حضارة الطين هي حضارة الرمال المستديمة. قد يكون هذا شاعري كثير لكن هي عمليا فكرة جديدة. شكرا. أتمنى أني جاوبت. Thank you.
Could I just add one
Yes.
quick note to that? And listening to translation of you there reminded me a little bit of kind of fan commentary to you. Seeing your show at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, Journey to Mecca.
Yes.
And even Hassam Mural's work with Studio Bound, you know, it's also kind of the imagery of the city. I mean, if I think, you know, as someone from outside, the way the Mecca is presented, you know, it's also often a kind of aerial view of Kaaba and very little about the city. And then going into did anyone see the Brooklyn Museum of Art show? Yeah, I mean, Hassam did, yeah. I mean, it's just like, you leave Brooklyn and you go into another city, literally, through the kind of use of the video work and films just going all over the place. It's an immersive experience, really, of a city that is so often seen as perceived as still and non-movement, but it's actually a thriving global city.
There's one question. We'll take a question.
Thank you, Todd and Ahmed. This is Anfal, and what I'm saying is not a question, it's a thought, and I want to hear from you both. I have been raised in an environment where green landscapes was admired more than sands or desert. And growing up, learning and looking at sands from different perspective taught me a lot of things, and I started admiring the landscapes and the architect that you have just showed us. What I want to hear from you is what do you think of those who's like me, who have been raised ignoring the fact that they actually live in a beautiful environment and admiring other areas? I know it's like a personal perspective, but what do you think we can teach the new generation about the landscapes here and how to admire them and the architecture as well?
If I would say something, I'm not an architect, but I'm very obsessed. All of my friends are an architect or urbanist. So I usually say, I imagine, the way that I see it, I imagine the cities also like a body. And I think listening to a body, when they say something, listen to our body, listen to your body, he will tell. So I think this is something that connects us. It's at the end, the location is part of our feeling. This is, I think, something it's very poetic, but it's true. It's true. Maybe Adam.
Actually, I'm happy you asked this question because I can go back to the question about what I like about Riyadh. Along the highways, the landscaping, and I've noticed this as early as 2009, especially comparing to like cities in the UAE, where there really is this kind of literally kind of pumping whatever chemical you can and to get as much green out of whatever vegetable there is, right? But actually the landscaping along highways, traffic circles, clover leaves, there's this attempt at a less green, you know, not the sharp greens, but the desert greens.
Yes.
The Ghaf tree, I think, is a tree
That's
that I've seen
true.
here.
We talk about this.
Yeah,
it was nice. Especially the way from airport.
Right.
A lot of friends tell me they feel this also.
So I feel like it's actually here, and that Riyadh was well advanced in terms of landscaping, that kind of landscaping I've seen. I'm not talking about kind of private homes, but I feel like, I think it's the Riyadh Development Authority that did that. I'm not sure.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, the desert green. I called it.
Yeah.
The desert green is a nice word.
السلام عليكم.
السلام.
أشكركم على الحديث الماتع. أنا حقيقة حسب ما سمعت منكم تكلمنا عن مدينة الرياض في الماضي والحاضر في محاضرة الزمن بلسان المدينة. لكن هل ممكن نسمع منكم إيش ممكن مدينة الرياض تحكيه كرواية، خلينا نقول، أو تروي حكايتها في 30 سنة القادمة، مثلا العام 2050، خصوصا لما تفضلت وذكرت ديزرت جرين مثلا، وإيش ممكن هذا ينعكس مثلا على الحياة الاجتماعية سواء في المشاريع السكنية، التجارية، الصناعية، لو بشكل وجيز.
هذا من السؤال يعني ممكن أنا أجاوب بشكل عام عن كل شيء أكثر من أنه أجاوب عن المدينة. يمكن هذا أكثر تخصصا وأكثر أكاديميا ممكن يجاوبوا الدارسين في أكاديميات هنا في الرياض مهتمين فيها. لكن أقول كلمة جميلة، ما ألا يشعر الجميع بجانب إيجابي في كل الأشياء التي تطرح؟ أعتقد أنه هذه جميلة، هذا نحتفي فيها كلنا الفترة هذه. كنا دائما كلنا نقول عندي مشروع فني، عندي مشروع معماري، خليني أسويه عشان الكل يشوفه. في جانب إيجابي جديد نشعر فيه جميعنا. أعتقد هذا هو الاحتفاء الحقيقي في الفترة هذه إن شاء الله، دائما دائما.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very nice subject, very nice speakers. Both of you, I'm a big fan. I just would like to elaborate about the geological aspect of Neom. Many geologists, they think this area called the الجرع العربي. الجرع العربي, it used to be a very ancient sea. And so now we are seeing Neom contained in a water. So I don't know if this is ironic or what, but it's a very beautiful picture. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's why we need also to hear. That's the dialogue. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, everyone.